Hey guys, today's topic is actually going to be how to properly ship a synthesizer and how to package it up. This is something I see done a whole lot that's wrong. Not here as much, but just like when I look at Facebook groups and that kind of stuff, you always see people griping on Fedex or UPS or any of these places, and yeah, they're rough with these packages. But you got to remember too, it's not just UPS drivers or FedEx drivers. It's also the fact they have to go through a sorting facility. They have to go through a lot of stuff between here and there. So if you don't have this thing properly packaged, you will have problems, guaranteed. I've actually had some units come to me that were improperly packaged. One in particular was a memory moog. And it was just put in a box, has no bubble wrap. And it actually V'd the chassis. It actually V'd the chassis in the middle. And luckily it didn't break any of the circuit boards, but it totally wrecked that unit. And it just so happened I had a spare chassis for it, and I was able to, switch all the guts out and put them into a better chassis. But if it hadn't been for that, it would have probably been a parts unit, just to be honest with you. It was that bad. So it's like I say, it's critical that you package these things up real well. I can't stress that enough. And probably about 97% of my business is actually through the internet. So I spend a lot of my time shipping and receiving synthesizers. And I found that this method works very well that I'm about to show you. Knock on wood. So far I haven't had any problems. And I've shipped them all over the world like this. And so it's just a really good method I find that works. And of course you can never go too far on it. Never feel that you can go, you can even do more than what I'm going to show you. But this is just what I found that really works well through the years I've been doing this. So we're going to be talking about three different methods. The first one is going to be an ATA case. It's in great shape. The next one's going to be an ATA case like you see here without foam. And then the third method is actually going to be if you don't have an ATA case at all, you just have just a unit to box up. So you can ship them all three ways and usually not have any problems unless your ATA case, which we'll get in that in a minute. I'll go over there in a minute. So the first one's the easiest. If you got an ATA case that's in great shape, the foam is in really good shape, those are the easiest. You just put it in the ATA case, shut it up. And what I recommend doing is zip tying the latches if you can. I usually use the big zip ties. And really all those are for is just to keep honest people honest. That's really all they're there for. And it's anti-tamper. So I'll sometimes use red ones. I'll use some odd color that I know is not just one of those that they can just go out and and they have in the factory. It's going to be something that's going to be a little bit different. But then I also usually, if it's something really expensive, I'll actually try to box the ATA case up as well. So I'll put the ATA case in a box and I'll actually seal it up and just make sure it doesn't move around the box, make sure it's nice and firm. But that's one way I sometimes do these things, which this one actually is going in a box as well that you see here. So when you have a new ATA case, so I will bring this up, is make sure there's no movement, like there's no side to side movement or front to back movement in the unit. A little bit's okay, like less than half an inch. But what happens a lot of times is that when you shut it up, the lid will actually somewhat compress the unit, and that's really kind of what you want. You want it to be somewhat of a compressed fit. And what happens is that usually falls on the knobs a little bit. Like usually it'll fall to the corners of the chassis, but then it also covers the knobs just a little bit. Now you don't want to have to sit here and push on that lid or get on top of it to shut it. You don't want that. That's not good. I'm just talking about just a very firm, compression. Well, what happens if you got any movement, the chassis can move and then your pots are actually touching that upper foam and it actually break the shafts off the pots. I've seen that. It's not often, but it does happen sometimes. So if you have front to back movement, I suggest you just put a little bit of bubble wrap in the back or in the front, just somewhere to keep it from sliding side to side. And then in a case of something like a memory moog where you have that big slope on the chassis, well sometimes because it gets narrow at the front, it can actually lift up inside the chassis. So what you want to actually do is put something in the middle of the keyboard, not actually on the keys, but on that piece of wood that runs across the top of the keys. I'll usually put something right there, and that'll just keep that thing from lifting up this way. So it keeps everything nice and flat on the bottom of the case and prevents damages as well. because you don't want to put anything on top of the keys because you'll stress the keys and break them. So avoid at all cost putting anything as a fitment on the keys. Just don't do that. It'll break them. So that's that method. Now, if you've got a case like what we have here that has no foam in it, it gets a little bit more complex, but you can still use it, like I say, as long as the case has enough room to fit the unit in there with a good set of bubble wrap, which I'll be explaining that in a minute as well. So the first thing you want to do in a case like this, you want to inspect it. Make sure there's no large bolts sticking out. Make sure there's nothing that can cause damage to the unit, which in this case there was. This is actually the memory mug belonging to Steve that we're looking at here. And I actually just made the video where I showed the end cap where it had damage from a rivet that had stuck out too far and it actually had penetrated the wood and just puts these ugly marks in it. So what I did in this case was actually the rivet was right here. You can see where it was. And what I did is I just took a rotary tool, like a Dremel, and I ground it off. I kept the rivet. I didn't grind the rivet out. I just ground the back of the rivet off so it didn't stick out so far. And so clean that up, and now that won't be a problem. So you just want to inspect, make sure there's nothing that's going to cause damage to the unit or damage the bubble wrap that you're going to put on the unit. Because once you lose your bubble wrap, you lose your protection. If it's something you can't remove, like let's say that you got something that sticks out a little farther than you like, but there's really not a good method to remove it, what I recommend is go buy some of this foam that's solid. This is like in the housing area at Lowe's or Home Depot. And then just use that and push it against that, and sometimes you can tape it in just so it doesn't move, and that'll keep that from hitting the chassis. And like I said, if you don't have room in your chassis, then don't use the case, because you will have issues if it's something you can't remove. So that's the method if you don't have a case with good foam. Now the next method I'm going to show you was actually if you don't have a box, but it goes hand in hand with if you don't have foam, because at this point this is a box, really. So as you can see here, we got a memory mug. Wow. I could probably sell tickets for wrapping these things up, because I'm sure it's quite a funny show. But what we have here is we have 100 feet of bubble wrap used. That's what I'd use on every unit I get in here, and I've got a method I find that works really well, like I said, as far as wrapping. So what I like to do is, first of all, you don't have to go out and buy new bubble wrap, but you need to make sure the bubble wrap that you're using is not popped. There's enough bubbles that it's not just a flat piece of plastic, because if all the bubbles are popped, you're basically just wasting your time, because that's part of the protection is these air pockets, and that's part of what makes this whole thing work. So you want to buy the large bubble wrap, not the little small ones, but the actual large, and you can get a 100 feet at Lowe's or Home Depot, pretty much any home improvement store. And that's what I do. And then what I'll do is I'll wrap it from front to back twice. Now when I'm wrapping it, what I do is I actually leave a little overhang, like maybe an inch or two overhang, and I'll actually wrap it like I'm wrapping a present, so I can actually seal up the end caps. And so I'll do that all the way down. Same thing on that end. I'll bring it to that end and then cut off the bubble wrap and form it and wrap it at the ends, and then I'll start a fresh row again. So there's 2 rows of bubble wrap from front to back. And both rows, when I start over, I actually put another layer sticking out and I actually wrap it again. So there's 2 layers even on the end cheeks. So everything's real well protected. And then what I usually do at that point is I write top, because it's easy to get lost when you're wrapping these things up and you can't see the unit anymore. So you want to make sure you keep up with what's the top and what's the bottom and where the keys are. So as you can see here, I've actually wrote keys on this one, top here, so I can keep up with where everything is. And then what I actually do is I'll wrap it from side to side twice. So that gives you even more protection on the corners, but it also protects the corners here, and just gives it a really good, it's basically a pillow at this point. It's a big old pillow. And then once I get it all bubble wrapped, I'll use this mover's wrap. This is like the stuff you'd buy to put on refrigerators and stuff when you're moving to keep them from opening up. And what that does, that just keeps everything nice and compressed so you can handle it easier. It's a lot easier to handle with it on there. Now, same thing with this. You want to go from side to side, not front to back. And the reason is for that is because if you go front to back, you can stress the keys. If you pull it too tight, you'll push down the keys, and if something happens, it can actually break the key springs, or it can break the keys off, or it can cause alignment problems. So you don't want to do that. You want to keep the bubble wrap tight on the corners only, from side to side. And then once you've got that, if you're going into an ATA case, you just fit it in the case, and then for any loose areas, you go back to the method of using scrap bubble wrap or foam, or packing peanuts, or whatever you got to make sure that this thing's not going to slide. And then if you're putting this thing into just a box, well, then what you want to do is put it in a box larger than what you have. So you put it in a box a lot larger, and then you can actually pack in around it with more bubble wrap or peanuts. And it's okay to use peanuts. I'm not against peanuts at all if you use them correctly and you have this thing wrapped like this, because this is the majority of your protection right here. This is like a cocoon for the unit. So once you have the packing around it, all you're really doing is you're trying to avoid these bubble wrap from getting popped from shock. So that's what the rest of the packing would do. It'd be where you pack it nice and tight from bottom and top to the box. There's no movement side to side, front to back, or from basically this way from top to bottom. You'd want to keep it flush. And so that's how I ship these things. Like I say, it's not easy to do this, but I do it by myself, and it's a job. But if you have two people to help you with that, fantastic. You can knock it out in no time. Now, when I actually do poly mugs, I actually do have to have help because they're so large and they're heavy. Memory mug's about 55 pounds roughly, so it's not too hard to handle. But what I'll do is, usually when I do it by myself, is I'll actually take something to sell on the floor. For example, I've got an Amazon packet here. It's bubble wrapped, and so I'll set one corner on it while I wrap, and I can rotate it on this as well. Just anything to keep it from getting ate up on the floor, because this concrete's kind of rough, and you don't want to do anything that'll scar the wood or scar the unit up. But that's how I do it, and I just thought I'd take a minute here and show the process of what this looks like, what your unit should look like. Now, like I say, heavier units take more work than the smaller units. You want to put a little bit more on the heavier units. But like I say, it doesn't hurt to overpack. Do not feel bad to overpack. This bubble wrap right now is $21 for 100 feet, which that's a lot of money, but it's worth that extra cost to my client to make sure it's going to make it safely. Because all the work I just did, if it gets screwed up here, then nothing I did matters. So it's very important that you pack things up really well. And same thing when you're shipping out. If you're shipping it to be restored, this can save you a lot of money, because if I get a unit and it's been improperly packed and it's got damaged, well, now not only do I have to do the restoration work, but I have to do all the repairs to it that happen in shipping. So this is a very critical time. And so that's how I do it. And I also recommend too, guys, whenever y'all package things up, take pictures. Take pictures of what it looks like. Because even if you put a declared value, like in Fedex or UPS, if they don't have pictures of what it looked like before, they're probably going to write it off, unless it was done by the Fedex store or UPS store. So just so you guys know, that's something I've run into. Luckily, I've never had to file a claim, but I've heard horror stories, and it's not a fun thing to work with. But that also brings up too, what I would recommend too, if you guys don't feel comfortable boxing it, get it to this point. So go on and do your bubble wrapping and everything, and then take it to a FedEx store or UPS store and let them finish boxing it for you. And you can tell them what you want and what you don't want. And don't be afraid to be vocal about that. I know a lot of people use those little air pockets. Don't use those. Don't use those things at all. These things are too heavy. They'll pop, and you've got free motion in there. So just make sure you stress to them, do not use those little air pockets, those little air bags, basically. You'll want to use a solid peanut, or you want to use a more bubble wrap on top of this just to pack in around the box. So hopefully this helps you out, guys. I know that's a lot of information. I know that's a lot to cover. But like I say, this is the critical area of the unit. So I've seen a lot of horrible jobs shipping, and I've seen a lot of a lot of bad things. But as long as you got this thing boxed up right, I rarely ever have had to have an issue with FedEx. It's extremely rare, because really it comes down to the integrity of your box and integrity of your unit, and that's really what it comes down to. So anyways, guys, hope this helps, and we'll have some more stuff here to come very soon. Take care.